Hello everybody, Eran Stern here, and today we learn how to control a coherent fire laser with this really cool, or shall I say hot, effect for creating laser beams that come out of our actress's deadly eyes. This lady can shoot lasers from her eyes. Don't believe it? Well, wait and see for yourself. It's true, I promise. Be careful not to upset her, as she can really hurt you. Here, see for yourself. Okay then, so let's see how we can warm up the temperature in this room. I'll begin with this face close-up clip I've prepared. This was originally shot against a green screen, and I already created the first basic compositing and replaced the background with this nice brick wall, then rendered out a clip for you, and we'll use this clip to build our effect shot. So drag the face CU clip to the new comp icon to create a composition the same size and length. Make sure you're at the first frame of the comp, then right click on the footage and choose Track Motion. Drag the tracker controls to one of the girl's eye and define the inner rectangle to the whole iris. Then set the outer rectangle, which is the search area, to include most of the eye. Then you can press the Analyze Forward button on the tracker controls. This should yield the tracking data for the first eye. Now we need to apply this data to a null object. So go to the Layer menu and add a new null object. Select the null object in the timeline and rename it accordingly. In my case, left eye. Select the face CU layer again and return to the tracker panel. Press the Edit Target to make sure it's pointing to the null object and click Apply and also OK the XY dimensions. Now repeat the same steps for the other eye, the right eye in my case. I'll skip forward in time to the place I've tracked the right eye and applied the data to the second null object named right eye. So now we have two null objects which holds the tracking data for both eyes. You can close the tracking controls panel and collapse the other layers if needed. Next, we'll create the iris's animation just before this lady will fire the laser beams from her eyes. For this, you'll need to create a new solid layer. So press Ctrl or Command plus Y, name this layer Pupil, and change its size to 100 by 100 pixels. Also set the color of the solids to white and choose OK. Next, go under Effect, Generate, and add the Cell Pattern effect. Change the cell pattern to crystals. Set the contrast to 130 and set the size to 15. Now I want to make it a bit more interesting, so in order to generate a movement to this pattern, we need to set an animation for the evolution. I'll use a quick expression to get it going, so by holding down Alt and pressing the evolution stopwatch, I can write down this expression in the timeline. Time times 250, which will use the current timing value and multiply it by 250. This will result a nice animation for the cell pattern effect. You can create a quick run preview to check if the rhythm suits you. Super, I think it looks very good. Now let's add a few more effects to this layer. Go to the Generate family once again and add the circle effect. Change the radius to lower number, say 40. Open the feather and set it to value of 18. Next, change the blending mode for this effect to Stencil Alpha, which operates like a super matte, leaving us with the desired result. Okay, next I want to colorize this a little bit. So from the color correction category, I'll add the tritone effect. For the highlight, choose a light pinkish color. For the midtones, choose a vivid red. and we will leave the shadows as is. Additionally, you can add the glow effect with its default values. Next, grab the layer in the comp view and move it on top of the actress's iris. Then hit S and scale it until it covers the actress's pupil, around 40 in my case. Then change the blending mode of this layer to overlay. Last step is to parent the pupil layer to the null object which holds all the tracking information. So make sure that the parent column is visible. If not, press Shift plus F4 and set the pupil to be parented to the correct null. In my case, its parent should be the left eye layer. Create a RAM preview and if necessary change the radius and the feather values of the circle effect until you're satisfied. By the way, you can turn off the eyeball for both null objects as they obscure this beautiful girl's eye and interfere with the creative process. Now set the opacity animation to reveal the pupil at the correct time according to your actress's action on the screen. In my scene, it will be just before the 1 second mark. Then I'll duplicate the pupil layer, disconnect the parent and move it in the comp view to the right place. Now I will marry it to the second null, the right eye layer here in my timeline, and you can also change the scale values if needed to fit the pupil of this eye. Then you can create another RAM preview to check that everything is aligned tight. Next stage is to add the laser beams themselves. For that, I'll create a new solid layer, name it Beam. The dimensions should be 1000 pixels for the width and 1000 pixels for the height, which gives us a lot of room to work in. Color should be black just to make it easy to spot. Then choose OK. Before I'll continue, I want to change the label colors in my timeline, which allows me to identify my layers more easily. So I'll select the pupil layers and change the label color for them to say pink. And for my beam layer, I'll choose a purple color. Nice. Okay. Now I'm ready to add the first effect, which as you might have guessed will be under the generate category and it goes by the name beam. I'll drag the beam layer to start at 1 second and 8 frames on my timeline, just after her pupils become red. Next I'll go to the beam effect properties and change the length to 100%. In the composition view, I'll place the starting point in the middle of her pupil and set the ending point to the correct place to the left of my composition here. Also, let's change the starting thickness to 20 and the ending thickness to 100. I'll now set a very quick animation for the time property. So the first keyframe will be 0% and after 2 frames I'll set it back to 50%. I'll return to the in point of the layer by pressing I on the keyboard and set its parent to be the appropriate null object, left eye in my timeline. Now let's create a RAM preview just to test it. And it looks very good. Now let's give this beam a more interesting look. Add the CC vector blur from the blur and sharpen category. Change the amount to 10 and the ridge smoothness to 5. Next, go to Effect, Noise and Grain and add the fractal noise filter. Alt-click on the evolution and let's repeat our expression trick now with a higher value such as time times 500. Finally, change the blending mode for this effect to screen. Wonderful! Really, I mean it. Look at it. It's a wonderful beam. Almost like Mr. Beam. Okay, let's stop the ramp review and let's duplicate the beam layer and unparent it. I'll change the starting point to the right eye and set its parent to the second null. That's the right eye for you. Now scrub the timeline to see that everything aligned together properly. Now let's move forward around 3 seconds and add some explosion that happens due to those laser beams. For that, you need some explosion footage. So, either use a clip from Artbeat's Real Explosion collection, or you can search the Cow's Free Stuff forum for free explosions. There's a great website there which offers explosions clip for free. Another option is to create your own explosion, of course. Just open the gas in your kitchen for say 15 minutes, press record on your video camera, grab a lighter and light up the room. Kaboom! You're dead, but you got a great footage for next generations. No, please don't do that. I was only kidding. I think a better way is to use software like Particle Illusion or Trapcode Particular plugin or even Apple Motion and render out a nice explosion to use here. This is exactly what I did. By using Apple's Motion, I've created this explosion hint clip, which happens at the end of the frame, and now I can drag it to my timeline and sync it to my animation like so. To amplify the effect, I'll add an adjustment layer, and from the effect menu, I'll go under Distort and add the transform effect. I'll move my CTL to the start of the explosion and set keyframes for position and scale for the transform effect. I'll move forward 2 frames and erase those values and then repeat it for a few times until you have at least 5 or 6 for each value. Once all keyframes are in place, select them and right-click and select Toggle Hold Keyframe. This will disable the interpolation between those keyframes and it will yield a nice camera shake. Next, I want to add some light atmosphere to the scene, which probably will happen at the time of the explosion itself. So let's add to the adjustment layer the exposure effect from the color correction category. Set the first keyframe for the exposure near the start of the explosion, and then while this explosion is in its biggest form, change the value to 1.3 and change it back to 0 when you see the end of the Big Bang on the composition view. Towards the end of the explosion, you can return to the beams layer, select both of them and hit U to see the existing keyframes. Then create a reverse animation that will pull the laser beams back to the pupils. While those lasers are still selected, hit T and set the keyframes in the opacity to fade out the whole layer. Few frames after that, you can select the pupil layers, hit U to see their keyframes, set a new keyframe for both layers where you are, and fade out the opacity back to 0 after a few frames. You can now close everything, go to full screen and watch the final outcome of this fatal killer blondie. As always, I suggest adding few sound effects to enhance the experience, and we are ready to view this shot. So be careful everybody, fire in the hole! That's it for this time. Hope you enjoyed and learned more tricks for your own foam effect creation. If you want to show your hot burning love, please stop by the Cow store and order for yourself my training DVD, which adds more warm and cool techniques for motion graphics design with After Effects. Until we meet again, this is Eran Stern for CreativeCow.net saying goodbye.